Hello tankers and tankettes, welcome to the second of my premium preview videos, and today we're looking at Dr. Frankenstein's tank. Yes, it is the 59 pattern, and a very odd looking machine it is indeed. This is the one I wasn't allowed to really talk about or show you footage of up until the deadline, and we've definitely passed that at this point. So no comparisons with a Churchill, you know what a Type 59 looks like. And you've probably seen an M48 pattern around at some point as well. So those are the 2 points of comparison, and those are the ones where I'm going to be talking about the stats a little bit. Well, mostly the Type 59, I have to say. So I've looked the armour up, and I might flash it up on the screen as well from Tank Inspector, but basically this hull and the regular Type 59 hull are virtually identical. The only difference I've been able to find is this little kind of curved bit of armour here where it sports the turret ring. It is marginally tougher on this than it is the regular Type 59 by an extra 20mm or something like that. Otherwise the hulls appear to be largely identical. So we can say when the Type 59 becomes a premium, it's probably likely to have, at least in its hull, exactly the same armour arrangement it has now, just about. I mean, that might also change on that there as well. The turret likewise is very nearly identical to the M48 pattern, but for one important exception. The massive MG cupola, which is I think 76mm at its toughest, is actually taller on this machine, and it appears to incorporate extra vision blocks basically for the commander, but that means it is going to be an even more prominent weak spot than it would have been on the standard M48 turret, so that's nice. Now, armour is not really a thing this has going for it. If it was a limited matchmaking premium like the Type 59, then I'd be able to say actually the armour is decent. But effectively it isn't. It's actually worse, in part because of the matchmaking and in part because this turret has, well, apart from that notable weak spot, not a lot of armour especially. There are some quite tough areas on the turret. The edges of the gun mantlet especially are incredibly bouncy. But as for the rest of it, if you get the turret cheeks, they aren't particularly tough. Although they're quite well curved, but considering this can see tier 10s, no, you don't want to rely on the turret armour on this, and you especially don't want to sit and let somebody aim at your turret weak spot, because anything and everything you will meet will be able to pen that at a mere 76mm of armour. So that's the armour taken care of. It isn't especially well armoured. I mean, it's okay against lower tiers and some same tier mediums I have found in practice. So if the armour isn't the selling point, is it the mobility? No, not really. It's actually worse than the Type 59. Not that much worse, but it has a very slightly worse power to weight ratio, because I think obviously the turret is going to be the culprit there. The forward speed is at 50 kph versus 56 for the Type 59. The reverse speed is 16 versus 20. So again, that's probably meant to account for the heavier turret, although I think the poorer power to weight would have done it alone. But so it's less mobile. It's not particularly whizzy, but it's not particularly bad. I mean, for a tier 8 medium, there are certainly worse movers out there. You're not going to be flexing all over the place like you would in an AMX CDC, for instance, but still, it's okay. It's good enough. So it's not the armour, it's not really the mobility. Is it the gun? No, that's definitely a resounding no. Now, this is the stock gun of the M48 pattern. It might be on other machines as well. I haven't checked that thoroughly, but I did see that you can mount this on the M48 pattern, and it's got exactly the same amount of pen and exactly the same amount of damage. Like the other two tank destroyers, well, I say other two tank destroyers, like the two tank destroyers, let's try and at least be vaguely correct in my English here. You know, I know it's a rare thing, but let's try. It has 240 alpha because it's a 90mm gun. That's pretty standard. However, where it does differ considerably is that 173 average pen, which puts it quite firmly at the low end of tier 8 medium tanks generally in terms of its penetration. Slightly better than the Super Pershing, slightly worse than the T-44, and that alone says to me that although this isn't a bad tank per se, as a premium, I'm not sure it's worth your money. Now, maybe yet still a further point of comparison would be the STA-2, and you might be thinking, what's the STA-2? It's the Japanese Tier 8 medium premium tank. You don't see a lot of them around on the battlefield, and in part that's because it came out at the same time as the AMX CDC, and the AMX CDC was basically vastly better in every way. The STA-2 had an inferior gun, inferior mobility, the armour didn't really... It wasn't like it was super well armoured. It was just worse in every way, and so therefore nobody bought it. This is, I think, somewhat in the same boat as the STA-2. It doesn't really have a selling point, to be honest. If it was a limited matchmaking premium, like the Type 59, then okay, I would say you can live with 173 pen and the 250 heat that you get, well, that is sufficient. But as you can see, with the test account I've had, I've been rolling around with rather a lot of heat on this because 173 pen for a not particularly mobile medium tank is not sufficient for dealing with tier 10s. I would still say, if you want a tier 8 medium for making money, buy the CDC. It is by far and away the best of them. This thing does not scale up well at all. It's alright when it's top tier. In tier 9 it's a kind of okay support machine, but in tier 10, no, you're left struggling. You don't want to be trading with tier 10s, even a lot of tier 9s, for 240 damage. And that's exactly the problem I had with the Canonian Jagdpanzer as well, is that the trades are just not worth it. Everybody else has much bigger guns than you, for the most part. Now, it's not like this is particularly bad in terms of its damage. I mean, I mentioned the T44. That's got 100 mil with, 175 average pen and I think 250 average damage. And of course, there's the T34-2 as well, the Chinese tier 8. But the thing is, both of those, while they're both regulars, are not particularly well regarded either. In fact, most people I know that I've spoken to don't really think the Chinese tier 8 regular is a good tank at all, and the T44, that again, I'm sure it has one or two fans out there, but the majority opinion that I have come across is that it is mediocre to bad. It's on that bottom end of the range of the tier 8 mediums, and this has exactly the same problems. It just does not scale up for +2, -2. Well, obviously the -2 matchmaking is fine, but even if it was +1, -1, you know. Yeah, I think this would be a perfectly good, fine, decent candidate for a limited matchmaking tier 8, but it's not, and that is really the only problem. However, in the case of this, I mean, the Canonian Jagdpanzer needs moving down to tier 7, or else it needs a substantial buff to its DPM, or maybe its amount of penetration it gets, or something. But this, I would say, honestly, more pen is all it really needs. Doesn't need substantially more anything else. I mean, the armor is okay, the mobility is okay. If you know when and where to use this thing and put it on the battlefield, I think you're going to do all right. And when I've been top tier, and even in some tier 9 battles, I have done all right. But it struggles badly in tier 10s, and there's no real way to... it doesn't have the flexibility to do things that more mobile tier 8 mediums can do in those kind of situations. So the fact that they're then asking you to pay even actual money for this thing... I'm recording this kind of late, by the way. You can always tell when I'm recording these ones late because the derpitude goes up by orders of magnitude. But yeah, basically the fact that they're asking you to pay money for this, as it stands right now, I would say no, it's not worth it. If you're desperate for a tier 8 Chinese crew trainer, well, there is actually one other option, but again, that's not particularly well regarded. And this at least has better gun depression. It's got 9 degrees in theory. I actually have to say the gun depression didn't feel that good. 9 degrees is actually pretty damn excellent, in fact. But in practice, there's something about... I don't know if it's just the shape of the... if it's a tall turret or whatever, but the 9 degrees didn't really feel like 9 degrees. So, yeah, that's a bit odd. But anyway, so, yeah, it's not terrible. It kind of depends what they charge for it. If it's the same price as a Super Pershing, for instance, then okay, maybe. If they slap it in some bundle with an extra 15 or 20 euros of stuff on top, then no, I would not say get this thing at all. It has a curiosity value, and obviously that alone will be enough for some people, but the gun is just not quite good enough. I mean, the soft stats are very nice across the board. 0.38 dispersion is decent. The 2.5 second aim time felt a bit long, I have to say, considering the amount of pain you have and the amount of damage you do. The fact that you have to sit there for quite that long, but that is offset by its ability to mount a vertical stabilizer, so you can compensate to that for that to some regard. And obviously there's the gunner skill that will improve that as well. So I've got some gameplay for you, but the TLDR basically is I don't particularly think it's going to be worth whatever they ask for it unless they decide to buff the gun stats. And it doesn't need to be substantial. I would say if it was around about 200 pen, that would be fine. That would be perfectly adequate. That would be for the rate of fire it's got and the damage it does and the gun handling stats. Around 200 pen would be just about, that's kind of gut instinct. That's where it feels like it should be, rather than 173. That just does not feel adequate at all. So all that said, let's go on to some gameplay and see this thing in action. So first off, we've actually got a little clip, and this was a fairly kind of meh game otherwise, apart from the amusing moment that's about to happen. But it also gives me a moment to reiterate something I said in the previous video, where I was just having a bad time with games, with teams specifically, and it meant I was getting frustrated, and I kept making bad shots like that and just playing more badly as a result. Because that's what happens when you play this game and you get frustrated and you just keep playing through the frustration. You play worse yourself. And normally I wouldn't have kept playing, and yeah, this whole bit's just silly. But I was very much aware that I had a deadline to meet with not only the embargo date for these videos, which was, as you're seeing this, yesterday, but actually also the review accounts were kind of limited period. They were going to be shot after I don't know how long we had them for, was it a week and a half, something like that. So I was, in addition to doing all my usual World of Tanks stuff, having to try and squeeze in battles with these where I could as well, and therefore, despite having teams where normally I've just gone, right, I'm going to call it quits, I had to plow on anyway. So yeah, so that was a fairly average game otherwise. Not going to show you the results for that one. Next up is Ensk, and we'll take a moment to talk about the mobility in action here. Most of the time, I mean, the power to weight on this is not particularly impressive. Most of the time you're going to be going along at about 40 on flat ground like this. You'll only ever really hit that 50 kph when you're going down slopes. So it's not super mobile. I mean, I've said that, but this kind of demonstrates it rather nicely. Now, there are actually two further tanks I could compare this to, which I didn't already in the garage section. One I could mention is the T95E2, which is the reward tank, not a premium, but reward, that you get for the Refer a Friend program. And it's a bit meh. You don't see him around very much. I mean, it's got the cool factor of the fact that nobody actually has one, or practically no one. I actually put up a little while ago a replay of one on my channel. It's actually one of the main search terms that brings people to my channel is T95E2, because somebody sees one in battle and goes, what the heck is one of those? But yeah, it's got this gun basically, and it's got the same stats, but better rate of fire, better accuracy. The machine itself is faster but has worse armor. And again, it sees tier 10s, so it doesn't feel like that good of a reward, to be honest. I mean, I've never particularly desperately wanted to go for one, so yeah. But the other machine we can compare this to is the T54 Mod 1, and that actually has a slightly better gun in terms of its damage and penetration, but only slightly. It's a 100mm gun with 250 average damage and 175 average pen, but the accuracy, actually I think the accuracy is equal to this. The Aim time is definitely worse. The soft gun handling stats are worse across the board. So this has got the better gun handling of the two. But that, of course, it has much better armor. It actually has, when it's top tier, very good armor. Enough for being an effective bully against some same and most lower tiers. Now this doesn't, purely, if nothing else, because of that weak spot it has on top of the turret. It's a big shoot me sign, and everything you meet is going to pen it, unless you get incredibly lucky. It's also placed such that, although you can use the sidearm on this, which is 80mm, to side scrape, you can only really effectively use it to side scrape in one direction, because otherwise you might be side scraping and thinking, haha, they'll shoot my hull and it'll bounce. But in practice, all that's going to happen is that they'll just shoot your weak spot, and it won't bounce. It won't bounce at all. So this IS-2 had his stock gun, and for facing most lower tiers, the AP penetration is fine. The problem comes when you're in higher tier battles. And actually, one of the replays I pulled out was technically a tier 9 battle, but the enemy team only had a couple of tier 9s per team, and none of the tier 10 games I had were worth showing. They were all just bleh. So at this point, the pressure is really on. I mean, our team had a lot more tank destroyers than their team did at the top tiers. And yeah, that's a full health T-32. So the tanks that were on the 1, 2, 3 line got rapidly overrun, and as you can see, there's still a lot of very healthy top tiers running around on their team. So this is getting remarkably close. So the T-32 is chasing me. There's an ISU closing in this direction as well. And it kind of looks like we might have to cap this one out. Now, I was so focused on what I was doing and thinking, okay, got to damage the T-32, but there's an ISU coming up behind me, that I didn't even really notice that we were capping and that we might be able to win by cap. And actually, I mean, it's fairly even. It's 10-11 at this point. But it's a very close runs thing. So actually, this is one of those circumstances where it wasn't necessarily a bad thing to cap. So I'm just trying to... I mean, I've got 3 shots of this T-32. He's just so desperately trying to decap and not managing it. But unfortunately, I was hoping to at least do a bit more damage, set him on fire or something. But sadly, that didn't happen. And there we go. We capped. So I got high caliber out of that, and it was an okay game. I mean, the profit I made, the XP I made, it wasn't even a first class, unfortunately, but that was the best damage I think I did in any of my 59 pattern games. And the fact that I didn't even get a first class in this, or maybe I did in a different battle, I can't remember, but it was purely to do with the fact that the only other people playing 59 pattern on the EU server were the other WG review accounts, and there are some much better players than I am running around in these things and doing okay. So that was the best result I got damage wise. Profit wise, as you can see, pretty good. The regular AP ammo on this is pretty cheap. It's 90mm ammo. It would be surprising if it was expensive. So if you can manage kind of 2 to 3k damage, you're going to profit well from it, but you're not going to get that in a tier 10 battle unless you get exceeding lucky. Lastly, we have Rolien Coal here, and this is from the NA server, where it went on sale a day before the embargo lifted on the EU server. So I was in the position of, hey look, I can have people send me replays of this, and I could potentially show those replays, but I can't really talk about the tank, because that's just, I don't know. But these things are decided by different teams on different servers, so if it seems like it's not joined up thinking, it really isn't. I'm sure it's a case of one hand doesn't really know what the other hand is doing, because it basically all goes through the Minsk central office of wargaming. So they all know, that they know at that end what's going on, but the individual officers might not each know what the other officers are doing until they do it. And that was awfully lucky that he didn't hit his own Jagdpanther 2 there. So you'll get to see the gun depression a bit more in action here, and like I said, my own experience was that it didn't feel like 9 degrees, but I think that honestly is just me. I think it actually is 9 degrees, it's just somehow it didn't feel like it to me, and I don't know why. Some weird quirk of my brain. But anyway, with this T-54 Mod 1 with his own 175 pen, the armour is more than enough to deal with people that don't have time to aim for your weak spots. Or your big weak spot, anyway. I talked a bit about the turret armour as well. There's actually, it looks like a big hole in the mantlet armour. So the edges of the mantlet are really tough. And the bits immediately adjacent to the mantlet are kind of tough, but you wouldn't rely on them against same tier tank destroyers or really many higher tier machines. In fact, the weakest of the turret front armour is about 165mm effective. Although, of course, towards the edges, it is basically an auto bounce. So, I would not rely on this turret, but it will sometimes bounce stuff for you, and especially if it goes to the edges of the gun mantlet. And if somebody is close enough to be trying to aim for the hole behind the gun mantlet, or to try and aim for those weaker spots on the cheeks, which you'd need fairly detailed knowledge of the armour layout to hit reliably. Well, if you're that close and trying to aim for those, you might as well just go for the big honking MG cupola on top of the thing instead. So, effectively, I mean, it's one of these, it's like with the KV-5 when I say the effective frontal armour of a KV-5 isn't 180, it's 120 because you've got the massive weak spot on the front. The effective turret armour of this is 76mm because you've got that massive weak spot on the top. So that's why I've been saying, and why I think, I know other people might disagree with it, that the armour isn't the point of this vehicle. If you can bully somebody, if you can harry them, if you can give them no time to think about the shots that they're thinking, and it's the same with the KV-5, then that is the point where your armour is going to be most effective. But if you give them time to make those shots, to aim their gun, or even if they're just a good player and they manage to snapshot that weak spot, well, then you might be in trouble. But in this case, well, Rolian has been moving up with his team, providing a bit of muscle. I mean, the firepower of this, in terms of the damage, I think the fact that it's a 90mm gun on a tier 8 is absolutely fine. I have no problem with that. It's just the lackluster penetration that I see as being problematic. But yeah, his own team on the 1-2-3 line have collapsed at this point, but they held up these guys long enough for them to close round and start shooting at them from the rear. And they actually, like that edge game, they could potentially have capped. It's still a fairly close battle. But Rolian here is still full health. There are sufficient allies left alive, and the enemies are, in some cases, sufficiently damaged enough that... I mean, the biggest thing they've got left is an STA-2, and that's not exactly the most threatening tank in the world. So the 122S, that's got a really nasty rate of fire, and he dodges one shell, and then he kind of sits in front of the gun. And with 175 pen, he possibly could have managed to bounce the return fire, but didn't matter. I think they managed to kill him before he could even reload once, or else he had a damaged ammo rack. But as it is, I mean, this sweep round and sweep up has done exactly what they wanted it to do. It's caught the enemy team kind of in a fractured state. They weren't turning around to meet the threat coming from behind. They were, I don't know, making as if to go towards the cap, but anyway, basically they were just utterly disorganised, and that's meant a nice easy win for Rolian. Well, not for the team maybe, but for Rolian I think that was a fairly relaxed game. So that was an ace. He got a Confederate and slightly less damage than I had, but still 3k is pretty good, and he's going to get a decent profit out of that because, again, the ammo's cheap, and he really didn't have any repair costs there. He had one hit from an STA-2, and that really isn't going to be particularly expensive. So, as you can see, yep, top of the team, the Panther 2 did well, 3k damage, the KV-85 actually managed a decent score, I think more from his kills than anything else. The enemy team, not that impressive, but on the whole, a pretty decent game. 100,000 credits profit. He actually had more kills than I did, so that probably accounts for the increased profit. And he also had 2400 assistance damage, so that definitely would help as well. But yeah, I mean, as part of a push, if you've got competent teammates around you, it's fine. It works fairly well, so long as you're top tier. If you're in a tier 9 or 10 game, if you're facing off against higher tiers, at that point you are really relegated to a support role. And that's not unique to tier 8 tanks, to tier 8 medium tanks in particular. As I've said, you know, the T-44, the T-34-2, they kind of get a bit of a bad rep in that regard. And that's, you know, it's not that it's special in that regard, it's the fact that Wargaming want you to pay money for this. And I really suspect that although it's not a bad tank, it's not good enough that people are going to want to pay money for it. And I don't think I would myself. As I've said, a bit more pen, and I think it's perfectly workable as a standard +2 matchmaking vehicle. If it had, say, sort of 190 to 200 pen, if it was in the same sort of range as the Panther 8.8, which is maybe a not totally dissimilar vehicle to this in playstyle, then I would be perfectly happy to recommend this. But as it is, with 173 average pen, no, I would on balance say don't get this unless you're desperate for a Chinese medium crew trainer, at which point you could argue it's better than a T-34-3. The gun is certainly less frustrating in its handling than the T-34-3, and it has gun depression, which is going to be a major selling point for a lot of people. So I'm not going to say, as with the K-Panzer, just don't buy it, it's not worth it. I'm going to say maybe this is worth it, maybe, but for me it wouldn't be, and I think for a lot of people it won't be. So anyway, so we've had a couple of preview videos. We'll be back to normal after this, but yeah, I've rather enjoyed doing these, and I hope Wargaming gives us more of these previews of upcoming vehicles in future, because I've moved away from doing regular reviews of tanks, but I feel like for machines they're going to ask actual money for, it's really very useful for all of you watching to have some idea, because it used to be in the old days you would just buy these things blind, and my first premiums were like that. I just bought them blind and really didn't have much of an idea what they were like. But YouTube has grown as a thing, streaming has grown as a thing, and now you have a lot more information to work with, so I'm definitely happy to be a part of that process. So if you found this useful, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can subscribe to my channel, and as always, stay tuned for more.